Now, finally today, if you're watching this, chances are that you don't also watch Fox News or CNN, or that you have in fact heard of alternative media. Or maybe you do watch corporate media just so you can see what new subject they're lying to you about. Either way, alternative media has become the media of the people, and when I say that, I mean the way it was intended in the Constitution. An adversarial press, explicitly mentioned in the Constitution so as to protect the press from being poisoned, bought and sold by the powers that be. Well, now that just seems like a laughable concept if you look at the construction of our mainstream media outlets. Yeah, that's 6 companies. 6 own 90% of mainstream media. So it's no surprise that alternative media has given rise to true, honest, straightforward reporting, whether that be on the ground in Ferguson or, in fact, inside Congress. One such outlet, Shadowproof, is pushing to strengthen that alliance between movements and media, to give voice to the voiceless and ensure that any story, every politician, every law and legislation is in fact shadowproof. Kevin Gosztola, founder of Shadowproof, shares more about the role of alternative media, their brand of investigative journalism, and art and activism. Take a look. We've seen a surge in quote-unquote citizen journalism versus professional journalism, and I wanted to hear your take on this. Could it be a bit like, politicians going to the same schools and basically becoming part of the same system and not being able to connect with people? Could journalism be seen in sort of the same way?
There's something to the idea that people who have become quote-unquote professional journalists are part of a system. And so, I particularly find this as I spend a lot of time covering national security or civil liberties issues. A lot of these people have connections to security agencies, these journalists, and they maintain them. So if you have a grassroots movement that is challenging surveillance, or if you have a grassroots movement that is challenging law enforcement, whether it be the FBI or policing in general, then you get this cultural attitude maybe that is rejecting of the grassroots movement. Now, on the other hand, I think that the role of citizen journalists has been improved in the last year, 2 years, in the sense that you actually, if you're working for a professional organization, like an establishment media organization, find that these people are very reliable in helping you find stories and being able to figure out what it is that is going on. Particularly, I would say, in the instances of the uprising after Michael Brown was shot and killed by Darren Wilson, and then you have all those other instances of protests and then Black Lives Matter, you found that media really needed to reach out to these organizers in order to find some kind of a foothold into these communities. I think that there's very little difference anymore between this citizen journalist versus this professional journalist if the person who is a citizen journalist is taking a lot of time to specialize in that craft. So I find myself thinking that we need to judge it based on the act itself. And I think that's important.
Now, speaking of your site, Shadowproof, it has an interesting layout that sort of struck me. There's the dissenter section, which covers whistleblowers, protest, and the global security state's efforts to contain, monitor, and silence movements. The prison protest section, which focuses on the experience of incarceration and prisoners' rights, examining the efficacy of America's punitive criminal justice model as a whole. And then the bullpen, which explores America's escalating class war and the influence of money and the super rich in politics and society. And then a weekly podcast called The Unauthorized Disclosure. So why is it laid out this way? And in particular, why is there a specific section that focuses strictly on the prison industrial complex?
So the reason why it breaks down like that is because we have the 3 different writers, myself, Brian Sonnenstein working on the prisons, and then Dan Wright working on the class warfare column. And so we decided to break it down like that. And I find that it happens to cover really critical areas. We're able with the dissenter column to look at very key systemic issues from the security state that impact people on a daily basis. With the prison thing, I think it's very important to have that prison industrial complex column, and to actually not only be talking about the issues, but finding a way to bring in the experiences of people from a rights perspective as they are prisoners inside of the institutions, all the correctional facilities, because we do have 2 million or so people that are incarcerated. And the particular focus of the prison industrial complex column so far has been to really look at this awful issue of prison healthcare inside of institutions. And so that was just a natural way to break it down. And then having the bullpen, we know that it's not just about the way that the government has set up and is going after dissenters, but there's a very real reason, and it's because you have the super rich and you have upper classes maintaining a certain social order for themselves. And you see that in their efforts to protect the 99% from having more of the pie, for lack of a phrase, they turn to law enforcement, they turn to the security state for ways that they can contain moments of civil uprising.
Right, and you touched upon this earlier a little bit. It also says on Shadowproof, it says that you're going to be forming relationships with organizations, and I was curious, is this an active movement building role? Is this let's create actions and events together, or is this we're going to be here for you to report on what you're doing as strictly as a journalism space?
The role that we want to play is more of an asset and not as a leader. I'm not about to step forward into any position in anybody's group or organization and try to steer a movement or any sort of effort in any direction. What I want to be able to do for organizations that are just now finding out about Shadowproof is to have you send your stories or your, I guess I could call them tips, but I really just want to know what people are doing in their communities. And then when we can find that there are things that are going on that should be covered, we make connections with those organizers or those people on the ground that are subject to injustice or are trying to change the way things are. It's about supporting those people who are traditionally kept in the shadows and don't often get the kind of support that they should from our media system. And the other thing that I haven't raised, I just feel like inserting into this discussion, is that there's also the role of bringing in out of work and struggling journalists that are already and have been doing great work covering movements and possibly are part of these communities but don't have a platform. And if we do find them, one of the things we're very committed to doing is finding a way to pay and support them and bring them on board to Shadowproof and give them a home and make sure that they feel respected in ways that they might not be respected if they tried to go get their work published at establishment media websites.
Right. And I'm assuming that Shadowproof is not funded by a shadowy corporation or something. You guys are funded by, reader donations, that sort of thing?
We're going to have this membership program, and it's really, I see journalism as like a public service, and there's this trend towards not paying for journalism. But I think we can see what happens when you don't pay and support good journalism. It devolves. What we're getting is free, but is it good? Is it really what you want to read every single day? Because it's trending towards listicles or being patronizing towards you or serving powerful interests. And here's a kind of journalism, not unique. There are other websites that are doing what we do, but I see really focusing on not only bringing people that journalism that has something real to it that points towards those kinds of issues that are not given coverage, but also then finding a way to form bonds and connections between people by bringing in those journalists that deserve a platform, those organizers that deserve a platform, bringing people together and making sure that we're able to dig in and get down to what are those things that we really need to be concerned about as a people.
Right. I mean, the press is the only industry that's directly mentioned in the Constitution, and the whole point is an adversarial free press, which is, as you said, not what you get for free these days. So that concept is certainly well shared by activists such as myself that look for information for the shows that we do, and even the actions that we do by looking at sites like yours. So finally, I'm also curious, you have sort of an arts, you mention arts and activism on the site as well, and then you have the protest song of the week. Why do you feel that, with everything else that's going on the site, why did you feel that it was important to add that artistic section?
Well, for one, personally, I come from an artistic background. Although I'm not out there making movies, I have a film and video degree. And I've always had this feeling that it's very important to art to find a way to embed that in the real world, in the real world experiences of people, and to not necessarily push a message ideologically, but to make sure that it's grounded in what's going on a daily basis for human beings. And so I saw an opportunity because I'm very interested. We launched a protest music project. And I think that this is very critical because we can't just, I think as an organization that's very committed to some pressing issues, you can't just only be concerned with those pressing issues. I think you also have to be concerned by the way that artists are trying to give voice to these issues, to make this become part of their art, because otherwise, you have burnout, you have the issue of only being concerned with how things are terrible every day. And what you have with artists is this expression. These songs that I'm featuring as part of this protest music project, and we have a weekly feature, and then also I put together a list of albums in the last 5 years just to show that there really is protest music and it hasn't gone away. And the effect is just to show that there are people out there that are expressing themselves and responding to the current state of affairs that we have in this country, and that it's not just the only stuff out there is corporate, or it's not that everything out there is just empty, celebrity-driven, gossip-type media.
Damn, and don't I know a thing or two about vapidity in the music industry, but that's a whole other low-life scum award there. For now, check out Shadowproof.com to get more info, and that is our show for the week.